Welcome to СивиЛНеթi. My guest is Ashkhen Arakelyan. She's an Armenian freelance journalist and student living in Germany. She's also the author of the book Sadistic Pleasures, Silent Crimes of Azerbaijan. The book tells the story of Armenian prisoners of wars kept captive by Azerbaijan. Thank you for joining us, Ashkhenjan.
Thank you for having me, Ani. It's an honor.
It's a pleasure shared. So you have interviewed 14 prisoners of war, both soldiers and civilians, women and men from all ages. One of your friends was among these captives. Is this how you decided to dedicate months of your time to this project?
Yes, exactly. Narek was one of the first prisoner of wars, I would say, that I got informed or I deeply got involved in the situation. And it utterly shocked me because before Narek, I wouldn't say I had an imagination about the whole situation and also about the systematic hatred and propaganda the Azerbaijani government has against Armenians and against the Armenian government. So Narek was the beginning of a new story, of a new understanding I started developing. Exactly, and his return also was the reason I understood, okay, this is the time someone has to start documenting everything they share, all these human rights violations against Armenians. And if not, then I started asking, okay, if not me, then who? Why should I ask someone else to do it? If I could do it by myself, I could do it myself because I can speak the language more or less. I had the time back then. I was in my holiday semester break. So, and I also had an international support. I would say I was in a country where I had all the access. I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I said, okay, it's the time. And started sharing the idea with my international friend and got the support and came to Armenia and started the process.
And why was it so important for you to document something that so it's been almost 2 years that the war happened. It's been 2 years now, actually, that the war happened and we still have prisoners of war. And what really motivated you to document this? Do we still lack information about what these prisoners of war went through?
We do. I don't like to call it a motivation because as the experience showed, the motivation left me alone during the process, at least the second phase of the process. It was more about the awareness. I understood that there's a lot happening, and for me it was the consistency to stay loyal to my beliefs. And I knew also that it wasn't just Narek who was in the whole situation. There were many Armenians. There were women and men. There were old people and young people who were in the situations. There were soldiers and civilians. So it wasn't just one targeted group. It was targeted Armenians. And this already bears a huge message for the world. And for me, I can't stand this injustice and the selectiveness, because also in the current situation, we see like how much attention one crisis can have. Of course, there are some political explanations for the current situation, but for me, everyone is human being and everyone deserves the respect for their human rights violations. So for me, it was okay. Maybe we Armenians do something wrong. Maybe we don't share a lot. Maybe our government doesn't talk constantly, systematically about this problem, and maybe also there is the language problem. We tend to share this message within us in Armenian, and why or how would the international community have access to this information? So it was basically the urge to cover this topic in a language which is accessible for majority of the population in the world, and this is the English language, I would say, and the experience has showed that it was the right decision to start it. So yeah.
So the characters of your book told you in details the tortures they have been through, both physically and mentally, by Azerbaijanis. And we also, Armenians living in Armenia, when we heard the news that hundreds of Armenians were kept captive by Azerbaijanis, we thought that they would go through these horrendous tortures. but we thought, we did not really imagine, but your book make all real. So I wanted to know, how do the people you interviewed cope both physically and psychologically after all the things that they have been through?
Well, as I said, there were young people and old people, and unfortunately, with the old people, I don't have contact anymore because most of them were coming from villages, or they don't have access to the internet, and I lost my connection, my contacts to them. But with the young people who were mostly soldiers, I would say it's not only unfair that they had to go through the whole nightmares they have gone through, but also the post-war trauma they had to overcome themselves. And for me, it's a fight on both sides, not only standing for their rights, but also standing and making them understand that they are allowed to get support from the government, from the psychologists, from their friends, for example, that it's not a reason for them to feel ashamed or to be scared to share what has happened with them. Unfortunately, I'm not successful, I would say, because they are still living in a society where it is, for young men especially, it is it is still a shame, let's say, to visit a psychologist, because what would neighbors say, what would friends say, and most of them are just bearing and overcoming the whole situations by themselves. The only time I witnessed myself that they got something, a support from the government, was during the first week when I interviewed them. So I visited a hotel room where there were many former Armenian captives, and they were supposed to go through psychological assistance. After that, nothing happened, actually. They started living their lives as if nothing is happening. And unfortunately, the Armenian society living in Armenia and abroad is also not talking about this topic a lot. They are not pressuring, for example, the government to do something, to still make sure they are in a stable psychological conditions. Did they overcome this situation? What are they doing? Maybe they need help to start a career, to do something else, so they get distracted from what has happened. It is not only about that they got captured. It's also about that they participated in the war. They have gone through a lot of things. They have lost their best friends on the battlefield. So I don't want to only focus on what has happened in Azerbaijan, but also what has happened on the battlefield. And I would say there is still the need to support these people. And I am sure, and I can assure also, that these people didn't get the enough assistance, attention they deserve to get.
Mm-hmm. But did you see, when you were talking with these people, that they had sort of a PTSDs, post-traumatic symptoms, or you could guess that there was something going wrong in some way psychologically for them, and you felt the urge that something should be done? Because we guess that going through tortures makes you very weak psychologically, or it brings another situation, a state of mind, but it's something that is very theoretical. But did you see that by yourself, that these young people had something that disturbed them mentally?
Absolutely. It's just no, although I wouldn't say they weren't feeling open to talk to me. I was actually surprised how they trusted me as a woman, and shared whatever has happened with them. But I think I was on time, because back then they felt the urge to talk, and I had the feeling they really waited to talk to someone, because they were just men with each other, or there's a man in a family who has kids. Of course they are not gonna talk while the kids are around. But when they met me, they shared so many things. I was myself very, very surprised. And then yes, absolutely, they were, most of them were out of norm control, I would say. Like, for example, their body language told a lot, how they were squeezing their hands, how they weren't looking into my eyes. yeah, this is also a cultural thing, but in this situation, it was strengthened, and most of them also cried while telling the interview, for example, or their voice, how the tone of the voice was changing. Absolutely, I can't describe the psychological pressure they had, and I'm sure they still have it, because the way when I talk to them, when I contact them, they don't have any motivations. Of course, not all of them. There are some people who overcame the situation, as I said, just because of having a healthy environment or healthy family, supporting family. But we know in the villages, it's very, very difficult to get access to a change, let's say. They are stuck in the same bubble, and for them, young men, 19, 18, okay, now they are most probably 21 or 20, but they don't have motivation. They are still in the war. They can't let the past, stay in the past, let's say. They can't get rid of the past. And they really need professional help, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And besides the fact that they lack of psychological help, there was one of your character who, after fighting and after being treated very badly and tortured by Azerbaijan, he was given back to Armenia, but then he was forced to finish his military service when he was only 19. So the government decided to send him back to an army situation, right? So besides the fact that there is a lack of psychological help, the government also sent back some of the POWs.
Mm-hmm. They did. That was actually while I was writing the book. However, I think not all of them, but some of them weren't supposed to continue the military service anymore. I hope it was because people talked about it, or maybe it was just the decision of the government. I don't know, but for me, I was also very, very sad and also angry. And they were angry themselves as well, because I talked to them. I asked them, how do you feel? Because now you are back in the military. They were feeling terrible. I don't know. I just felt the frustration and hopelessness. They were in the current in that situation, and I was very, very happy when, I think after 2 or 3 months, they texted me and they told me that they are not continuing the military service. However, I don't know if it's gonna be temporary, like give them break and they will overcome the situation, and then they will continue the military service, or is it over? They are done with their obligations, let's say.
I wanted to ask you, why did you choose to call the book Sadistic Pleasures?
Yeah, this was actually one of the hardest parts during the publication of the process, because my international friends thought it's too commercial. However, I explain the purpose, the reason I chose this title in my book as well, because many Armenians were tortured to death. And these people would just stand, the Azerbaijani soldiers would just stand by, watch, laugh, and continue doing it. And for me, they had pleasure. They had pleasure doing it, because if you don't have pleasure, you don't laugh, or at least you stop what you are doing. This was the first title, and the subtitle, Silent Crimes of Azerbaijan. We witness what's happening. Until now, the Azerbaijani government didn't face any sanction, didn't bear any responsibility for doing what they have been doing. Not they have done, but they are still doing. This is very important. And this is silence, because they continue doing their crimes, and the whole world is watching. The institutions that are supposed to be there when human rights are violated are still watching, knowing very well what is happening, but not reacting and not meeting the needs of the Armenians in captivity.
But still, in your book, you talk many times about the fact that the Red Cross went to visit the POWs, and they were trying to do their best to help or to bring letters from relatives to the POWs, and they were asking questions about are they treated well or are they tortured, but they were also telling lies, Armenians, because they feared for their life. When they were asked if they got tortured, they said no, because they knew that the consequences would be worse for them after meeting the Red Cross. So in some way, the Red Cross was also trying to do its best, as I could read, but it was in some way sometimes powerless too.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree, and I'm also very thankful to the Red Cross in Armenia and abroad, International Red Cross as well. However, their function was just humanitarian, to make sure people are safe, let's say, but they weren't guaranteeing the safety of the people. And during my I also had an interview with the Red Cross office in Yerevan, and there it was clearly highlighted that the role of the Red Cross was to make sure people write letters, to make sure the letters arrive to family, to make sure people are still alive there. However, they couldn't and they didn't guarantee that someone would be alive or come back alive, let's say, because there were also Armenians who were killed while captivity. However, I must also mention, and I did mention this in my book as well, that many Armenians didn't commit suicide because of having visits from the Red Cross as a sign, and it was a sign of hope for the Armenians, and therefore I'm really very thankful to the Red Cross in Armenia, or outside of Armenia.
Mm-hmm. So what was the most striking moment or the most striking thought or talk that you still clearly remember after meeting all these Armenians?
Yeah, this question is asked a lot. However, I don't want to differentiate or choose a specific story, because I got connected with many of them, and each is a separate person, and I have separate emotions, feelings, and memories with each of them. However, there was this story of a woman who was later on I found out that she was captured, as we saw the video trolling on the internet during the war. And we Armenians thought it's an Azerbaijani propaganda and started trolling the video on the social media and making so many jokes, so much fun of the video. And later on, I didn't know it was her when I was interviewing her. I was interviewing her, and she talks about a situation which is familiar to me. And we started talking about it in details, and then she says, yeah, that was me. I was in the video that was trolling on the internet, and we Armenians thought it was propaganda. And for me, this hit me hard, because I realized, okay, I saw something on media, I was under propaganda, but it was an Armenian, and it was a woman, and what has happened behind the scenes is very unknown to us. And now I'm interviewing the person who tells me what has happened behind the scene, and this revolutionized my media knowledge, I would say, my beliefs, and from that point, I actually, when I'm reading, for example, news, I take it very critically. I check what are the sources, even if it's an Armenian news or news from Western, doesn't matter. I start taking it very, first criticizing it. Why should I believe it? What are the sources? Because I had the experience, and I felt very ashamed while sitting in front of her, because I was also one of the person who made fun of that video. Whereas the person was she had a blanket on and a grenade under the blanket. It was about her life, and we on the other side were making jokes.
And plus, besides this, she went through many tortures after these videos, and she also tried to defend Armenia when she was put on trial, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, she gave her life for us, I would say. Thanks God she returned Armenia, and she's safe, and she's an awesome person. But on media, you don't understand all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And last question, many of the people you interviewed justified in some way the behavior of their torturers, which was very surprising for me. They were saying that they in some way understood why Azerbaijanis did this to them. They said that they felt the hate towards Armenians because Armenians back in the 90s during the first Karabakh War, they killed some relatives or they chased some Azerbaijanis from their houses. So they had this hate, and the Armenians you interviewed sometimes were justifying the tortures. And you also write in your book, none of them wanted revenge, nor had any of them even expressed disgust or hatred towards the Azeris. So I wanted to know, how do you explain this strange act of empathy for their torturers, or at least this lack of hate and revenge?
Yeah. I would explain it on one side, on a governmental level, on the other side, the lack of knowledge of history. Because in contrast to Armenia, Azerbaijan used these 30 years to systematically create narratives and dictate this to their people, and these people believe in narratives. We Armenians don't even imagine this exists. They call Armenia a terroristic state. How Armenians did so many massacres. They spent these 30 years in lobbying, buying international partners, everything. They used these 30 years to build to get ready for the exact moment to revenge. To face the revenge they have been waiting. What has Armenia done during these 30 years? Nothing. Artsakh, the problem of Artsakh wasn't priority for us. We took our victory for granted and we forgot about it. My father participated in the first Artsakh war, and I'm 26 years old. I don't remember a single case where we would sit in our family and talk about hatred or any aggressive narrative, let's say, about Azerbaijan. It was war, it was over, that's it. I never had this hatred in me. Of course, after the 2020 war, everything changed. But before that, it wasn't in our priorities. Not as a civilian and not as a government, let's say. And on the other hand, people lack knowledge of history. These people, for example, the people I interviewed have no idea that there was massacre in Maraga, in Baku, in Sumgait. When I ask them the questions, like, okay, good, this happened, not good. I'm not justifying. I also mentioned this in my book. I'm not justifying any massacre. But if this happened, do you know that before this, there was also this massacres in Sumgait, in Baku, in Maraga? They were looking in my eyes. I understood that they don't know anything about the history, and this is very, very sad. This is a national problem, I would say, because we don't know how to prioritize problems, things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not promoting any hate, because it will do harm first to us. But again, if we start talking about this issue, I would say Armenians lack history, and I would say the Armenian government failed prioritizing its interests, its problems, regarding Azerbaijan.
But in the case of a torture, I was wondering after what you just said that does really history has something to do with that? When you've been tortured by some torturers, you should feel at least a bitterness of what you've been through, and you should feel a little bit of, you don't need to know history to feel something bad about someone who did something bad, like torture to you. You know what I mean? It's not about only history that people, not only justifying, but the fact that they don't want revenge, or the fact that they don't feel any hatred, besides the fact they just want to live their life peacefully, right? They don't feel any hatred towards their own torturers. That's what is interesting. It's purely emotional how Armenians here, they're not seeking for bad things to happen to their torturers in this case.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's about only history or the lack of history or the fact that Armenians were not educated in the hatred of the Azerbaijanis. It's more like the relationship that you have between a victim and its torturers. So how come there is no such kind of emotions?
I don't know. I would say the ones who participated in the war were already got already used to many things and were emotionally very numb. And when I interviewed them, for example, and then got in contact with them or met them again months later, I would say I felt already the emotional change. They were realizing they were using different words, emotionally more negative, let's say. And the ones who weren't in the war but got captive, they got used to the situation. They got used to the beatings. One of the former Armenian captive even told me, I was so scared because I was getting used to the situation. And I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna live here all my life and I'm getting used to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you, Ashkhen, for this talk.
Thank you as well.
Thank you for watching and continue to follow CivilNet.